Hello, and welcome to the Joyful Rebels podcast where rebellion meets wellness. We've got Claire and Donna Thomas here, your mother daughter duo, and we're here to bring you our insight, some science, and maybe some laughs.
Maybe.
In this, our shared pursuit of finding more peace, joy, and balance in our physical and mental health. Thank you for listening today, for joining us as we discuss some practical tips to empower you on your journey to living your best life. For today's Ask the Joyful Rebels episode, you may want to grab a pen and paper, your notebook, maybe the notes app on your phone, have that ready to go because we're going to do some work and
Okay.
it's going to be fun. But first, you may have noticed that we took a little break. Summer was happening. We wanted to regroup. We wanted to refresh. We wanted to gear up, get ready for this transition into fall. And we think that this episode and the work that we're going to do is a perfect way to jumpstart again that transition into fall, new beginnings. But first,
Mhm.
highlights of the summer. Mom, I would love to ask you if there's anything you want to share. Again, it's been over a month. We haven't connected with all of y'all listening. So, Mom, what can you tell us about life? How's life going?
Hmm. Well, we were just together, which I can't. I have to mention because that was so fun. If you're listening and you're don't know our story, mother daughter, but Claire lives in Louisiana. I'm in Illinois, and we just spent a good portion of time together. And the fun thing is that when we're together, uh, part of us from a business standpoint is like, let's make sure that we get like pictures or video or do some, and we don't. We don't do hardly any of
Uh,
that because we're too busy living, and we
mm,
hope that for you too. So we just had a great time. We spent some time in Michigan, and it was great. It really, if you're going to live far away, Claire, I'm so grateful that we can connect digitally, and then when we
mm,
get in person, it's just that much sweeter.
yeah.
So I had such a great time. So that was fantastic. From a creative standpoint, I feel like I've been able to be of service over the summer and started a new project of having a community yoga class where we combined yoga and prayer and really wove those two things together, just for people that want to have a conversation with God. So it's open to anybody and whoever shows up, and it's been uh, fun from the movement side of yoga, because I think that that really unlocks. I think the way that the poses or asanas are set up, that is it's kind of a unique, it's uniquely hard. Would you agree on that,
Mm,
Claire?
yeah.
Like, it's uniquely hard. Like, here we are, weightlifters, and we hybrid athletes that do cardio too. Claire's a runner, I'm a rower, but yet when you move, get the flexibility in there, it's a challenge, and it's a challenge for everybody. And that's really what I'm finding. And the women that are coming to this class are just so open. They're open to the experience. The After you do physical, the poses, and it's a vinyasa class, then there's this prayer. You're just open to hearing, having somebody like intercede for you. So whether that's your thing or not, it's a unique experience that I'm able to offer and play with. So my creativity, the things that are important to me, and so me knowing what, like, gets me fired up, I get a chance to do that. And I haven't always been in a season where I've put it into action. Sometimes it just rolls around in my head.
Mm,
So there'll be more on this experiment and this really great this class that I get a chance to do. But it's been really fun because I'm reminded that we're all connected.
mm,
And I've learned that through the people that have come through the doors for the class, how I feel great to be able to use some of the gifts I've been given. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But each season gives us new opportunities, and that was mine for the summer. And I'm going to continue to do it until we don't. How about you, Claire? How has this season looked for you? Seems like it's been kind of busy.
Ooh, just a little bit, just a little bit. My new background from the recent move. We move, and then 2 weeks later, I go visit Illinois for a month.
Yeah.
It's a little nuts. Um, but Mom, I just want to say I love how you talked about being able to be creative and how that's opening up new pathways for you. Because I do think that when we get into talking about our topic for today, being able to explore our creativity is something that will help us find happiness and strength and success and can happen at any time. So I think that's cool that that's something you're exploring in real time.
Mhm.
Um, We did get pictures, okay? Let's
We
just be
did.
clear here. Let's just be clear. We did take the time to take some really cute pictures. So you'll see those shared on social media later. But it is funny because we had to schedule it. We're like, oh wait, we just spent a month together. Let's take a couple pictures.
It was
But
like the
yeah,
last day too. We're like,
oh shoot, we're
can't
running out
take a
of time.
shower.
Um, but yeah, I had a lot of highlights from the summer. I went on a stand-up paddleboard for the first time in my life. In 37 years, I've never done it, so that was fun. I even managed to hold crow pose for my
Yep.
yogis out there on a stand-up paddleboard for approximately 0.02 seconds. So that was, huge, a huge accomplishment for me. Um, Also, I have been gearing up I wasn't necessarily planning on talking about this, but I'm actually starting school in a couple weeks, which feels like crazy. But mom, you talked about big changes. Yeah, I actually will be starting a PhD in sociology at Louisiana State University. So I
Wow.
actually went out and officially bought a few LSU Tiger shirts because everyone wears those in the state. And I was like, oh, I need to fit in. But starting a new thing. I never thought this was something I'd be able to do, and not to, tell the entire backstory, but I will say that it was always a pipe dream of mine to go back to school. And I do think that when I was a few years back, when I was really like labeling myself as having anxiety, I was drinking too much. It just felt like something that would never happen. And I cut out drinking, I made some other life changes, and then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go for it. And I got in.
Mm.
That being said, hello, imposter syndrome. I'm still feeling that pretty hardcore. So that also ties into today's episode because what we're going to talk about is identifying your strengths. So today's question for Ask the Joyful Rebels, where you ask and we answer. I know I should, but it's hard. How can I celebrate my strengths? So knowing yourself. You've heard, Mom, we've talked about that a lot. We have some resources on that you'll hear more from us about later. But if you want to make any meaningful, sustainable changes in your life, we would argue that you've got to know yourself. Part
Mhm.
of that is being able to identify your core values and beliefs, whether they're ones from your past that you can let go of, what you identify with now. And we actually have a past podcast episode on that. So go check out Evaluating Your Core Values if you want to start from there. Another way to get to know yourself is to be able to identify what you're good at. And I know, Mom, I know, for example, you're great at being able to point out other people's strengths and what they're good at. But sometimes, right, it can be hard to shine that light on ourselves
Mhm.
and actually say, oh, these are things that I'm good at. So today, we've got a two-part strategy to help you to celebrate, identify, and then celebrate your strengths in this quest for knowing yourself. So before we get into it, and again, if you haven't, go grab your pen, paper, get your
Mhm.
notes app ready. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the history of this because I thought this was really interesting. So if you go back to the Middle Ages, theologians, what they taught is that our purpose was to work to survive. Like that was it. The only people that had a more of a divine calling were priests and monks and nuns. But when we get around to the Reformation, the new concept, the overwhelming concept was everyone has a calling, everyone has God given strengths, and it's our duty to discover and use these strengths. And so then the idea became, okay, I'm going to figure out what my strengths are. And then people started to have, oh, these beliefs like, oh, these are God given strengths. So now I can utilize them. And it became almost a self fulfilling prophecy of, oh, if I think I'm really good at this, I'm going to feel more confident in it. I'm going to go out, I'm going to explore these strengths, I'm going to try new things. And so what we see is several examples start popping up in history of people who all of a sudden are able to transcend the class that they're born in, right? Because before that, it was if you're born in a class, at least in many societies throughout the world, that's where you were going to stay. But then we have
Mhm.
people like Da Vinci, Galileo, Shakespeare, Saint Teresa of Avila, who are come from small beginnings but do
Yep.
huge things. And so we ourselves, we can bring new joy, new meaning, new creative possibilities, which mom, you were just talking about that, to our lives by discovering and using our strengths. And it's never too late. Whether you've thought about this before, whether you feel kind of icky or weird building yourself up, like, oh, I don't want to be bragging, you're not. Okay.
Mhm,
Just toss that feeling aside. This is important for us. You know, our wins journal?
mhm.
When's the last time we talked about that? We owe it to ourselves to build up a collection of our wins, of things that we've done well as evidence for when things start popping up, like imposter syndrome, or if we feel stuck, we're not sure what we should be doing. We need to build this collection of our wins. And so today, we're going to have a worksheet that we're going to go through together.
Mhm.
So if you're ready for it, Mom, I'll have you start us off, but we've got two sections today in our worksheet. We're going to brainstorm some of our wins and then we're going to reflect on them. So we hope that you have fun with this. If you need to pause and go grab your writing utensil, go for it. But Mom, take it away.
Okay, before we start, I can't let it go. You guys, y'all, she got into a PhD program. I'm not gonna let that go past without you just let that slide right by. I'm like, excuse me. I don't know what you guys know about that process, but it's lengthy, it's intense. And Claire, I am so proud of you for keeping this somewhere in your brain rattling around, regardless of how your life was going, and then following through with it, which I think is brave, bold, and just so awesome. And so I would say one of your a huge strength set for you is resiliency and grit.
Mm.
And I am just, you guys, we need to celebrate that. That is a joyful rebel. That is somebody who then helped to change some things inside, and then that fire that was in there, that was just this little dim little, a little tiny little flame, had a chance to get some oxygen to it, and it took flight there. And I'm pretty sure that's 3 or 4 different metaphors all rolled up into one. But
I
it
love it.
really is, you know that we're research backed when we take the information and the arguments and the topics that we have. We find peer-reviewed research that we then base our discussions off of. Claire will now be doing research that maybe we will be talking about in future episodes. So please let that land for a second, like I am trying to too. And I'm sure you're dying. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you're watching Claire die a slow death over there. But it really, Claire, I'll be your biggest hype man forever because I'm just so proud of you. And I'm sure if you're listening, you're probably thinking the same thing. So I didn't want to let the
Thank
time
you.
go on that. Okay. So yay on you. Can't wait to hear how that goes. And it only took me, I've been like, why aren't we talking about this on the podcast? She's like, not yet, not yet.
I
So
was
I'm really glad it
scared.
came out today. I'm really glad because that makes it real, even though all the other
Mhm.
signs point to it being real. So even talking about our strengths. So let's segue into this, that there's, a two-parter here. Hopefully that you do have something to write down, because there is some magic that happens when you actually are are saying something out loud, recording it. Like, it just gets a little stickier. And these are really important things to brainstorm because they do bring clarity. And here's the really cool thing: they bring clarity in different pockets and different seasons of your life. And that is, I'm finding that so true. So as we bring the topic back up and I'm going through the information, I'm like, oh, look how it looks now. So again, you guys, if you're working on yourself, the physical and mental, like, you can revisit old ways to view how things are going in your life, and you will come up with different answers. And
Mhm.
these answers all drill down to get you to know yourself, who you are now, and that absolutely creates peace and ease. And you go through your days and you can find even more joy. So I'm off the soapbox. We're into the brainstorming mode. So let's start. I've got 4 questions for you, 4 ways that I want you to look at this. And this is a brainstorm. So when you're brainstorming, remember, there's no wrong answers, and you get a chance to say things without the filter of having to be like somebody else is listening, which can sometimes change what the answer is. But the first one is that, we're celebrating you. Bottom line, we're going to celebrate you, and we're going to start really, really small, because that's the way to do it. We're going to start small and we're going to get bigger then. So the first one is, what have you done today? What thing did you do that you are super proud of? You don't have to think too hard on it because it's today. So I don't know what time of day that you're listening, but it could be you're proud of something that you either did or something that you let go of.
Mm.
And whatever it is, it could be like a small nuance in a conversation. Maybe you set a boundary. Maybe you got a workout in, whatever it is. What are you proud of today? And I'll give you an example. Sometimes it helps. It doesn't have to be the same as mine. I had breakfast with a friend. You're like, oh, I'm so glad you're so proud of yourself for having breakfast today, Donna. No, here's why. Because what I wanted to do in my life when I left my 50-hour a week corporate job was to be more relational. I wanted to have different conversations with people. And I'm making time to do that. And I did it today. So I am proud of that. I am. I'm following through on something that mattered to me. And it doesn't leave my brain. It's now wrapped up into my days, weeks, and months. So I'm going to consider that a win. That one goes in the wins journal. And it was a win because I got a chance to spend time with my bestie. So wins all around. So again, it can be a behavior, a thought, or maybe even just the awareness of a thought. Think about that. You didn't even have to do anything, but you're like, oh, I just realized that I'm following through with something. That's it. Like I'm thinking about it, and maybe that gets me closer to action, maybe not. All of it counts, you guys. That's the bottom line. All of it counts. So number one is what'd you do today? Okay, you got it? Shouldn't have to think too hard. Now let's pull the lens out just a little bit. How about the past week? What are you proud of from the past week? What happened? What's the first thing that sticks out that if you just reviewed the tape just a little bit, you can go, okay, this is the week. Something happened. I felt pretty good about it. I didn't even know why, but again, it could be a behavior, a thought, an awareness of a thought. Think of the places that you've been, the people that you've been with, and maybe you were by yourself because we spend a lot of time with ourselves too, right? In our own heads. So, what happened this past week? Okay. Can you guess where we're going now? How about if we go even bigger? How about the past year? That's a big jump. That lets in a lot more data points of things that you've done, thoughts that you've had. So now you're going to sift through that filter. What happened the past year? How about if you pick the top three? Top three things. And I have to share an example because I had such an aha with this, you guys. When I look back, sometimes I'll do that. A lot of times in society, we'll do it at the end of the year where you take a look back. But here we are mid-year. Why don't we take a look back mid-year and see what happened there? And I thought like identity as you're moving into the next season of your life, that for me came about. I'm seeing how diet culture has the ways that that has taken a hold. I'm like, okay, I've seen that a lot, but I'm seeing it. It's not just lurking in the shadows. It's right next to me. And I'm like, okay, well, then let's have a conversation about it. So I'm not horrified. I'm just like, okay, that's interesting. And I also am looking at like flexibility, going with the flow. There have been times I've been like so rigid. Like, I got to do things this way. I got to do things this way. And I feel like there's been so many opportunities to be like, okay, I'll do that. And I can be flexible, but not joyful. And what I'm noticing is that when I have to pivot and do something differently, I'm like, okay. And I just like that does not get my panties in a rumple anymore. You guys, that's big for me. Anybody else? Where my list makers? And are strivers. I like that. I like the word strive. And you need to be a striver in certain pockets of your life, whether it's taking care of your family, whether it's um, making sure that you're paying your bills. Like, there's real life things that happen. But what happens sometimes when we're striving so hard that just becomes a way of life. And I'm here to tell you, and that's one reason, one good thing about having a couple of generations talk about something is that at this stage of the game, when you start getting into your 60s and 70s or 50s or wherever you're at, you don't have to strive in the same way. Like life changes up a little bit, and that's a cool thing. But what do you do with it? And I'm learning that I can be flexible and I can go with the flow. It's a big deal because every stage of your life has awesome things in it if you look for it. And if you know your strengths and you leverage your strengths in each different season. Okay, so did you get three in the last year? Last 6 months. Okay. Lastly, how about overall? What about big picture? Let's really widen the lens. What's your biggest accomplishments across your lifetime? You're like, dude, I didn't know we were going to go that broad. Could be personal, professional, something you gained, or something you cast aside. What are the first few things that come to mind? And here is the kicker for all of these: you get to brag on yourself.
Mm.
So hard, isn't it? I don't know why. Brag on yourself. What's the big thing? Did you win any awards? Did you, were some relationships eliminated that then you can look back and go, that was the best thing ever? Did you make a choice and now you could see that it actually was a great choice? Did you go through a life stage where either you had kids or you didn't? What is it? What stands out? And there's no judgment what you think is important. So even if that isn't supported by your tribe or your friends or your family, that's not the point here. It's what you think is important. So you start with today, you look at the week, you look at the last year, or I would say 6 months. That's more manageable for me. And then you look overall. And then how does that feel? Were you able to find some things? How'd that go, Claire? Were you able to see, like, did something come up right away or did you have to dig a little bit?
I intentionally didn't go through this list until you read it because I wanted to see what came up. And I definitely appreciated your prompting on some of it because, especially as you zoom out, man, you forget some of the amazing things you did, right? Like, if we had more time, right? If you had more time to think about what you've accomplished in this life, I mean, the list would be the whole page, or more. So I
Yeah.
think that it's cool. Hopefully, you were writing along, you decide to do this to see it written out on paper, all these things that you've done, like to think it, to write it, to say it out loud, to read it. Those are all different ways that it's reinforcing in your brain this real life evidence that you have that you're awesome, because you are awesome. So if you need a couple more minutes to brainstorm, that's cool. Pause it. We're going to segue now into the reflection part. And to do that, what I want you to do is look at this list that you just made. Look through it, and then we're going to start to see we're going to start to assign characteristics or strengths to some of these accomplishments, right? And so, just to help, maybe some of them are really obvious. Maybe, Mom, you mentioned for me the resilience and grit. So maybe some of these things that you've done, you're like, oh, yeah, that was a time that I was resilient. But I'm going to read you off some of these other identified, like research identified character strengths that they say are common to all humanity. And I just want you to start to take note, like maybe a separate list now, from all your wins that you've had. What are these strengths that you were exemplifying? So examples are creativity, curiosity, love of learning, bravery, persistence, integrity, love and kindness, leadership. Maybe some of your wins exemplified that you have hope, that you're hopeful, or your humor, maybe your spirituality. So you're going to work through and you're going to come up with, again, you've taken these wins that you've had. What strengths are those exemplifying that you have? And then I've got some reflection questions for you just to kind of tie it all together, because we did this, brain dump, this brainstorming, and now we're connecting the dots between this is what I did. This shows that I have the character trait of this, right? We're making these connections. And now I've got some reflection questions. So the first one is, are there any commonalities? Like, if you're looking at all these wins you have, are there certain ones that like keep popping up, like, man, this is me persevering to get this award, and I had to persevere to get this promotion, and I had to persevere to finish this race? Like, do you have ones that keep popping up over and over again? And maybe this is something that you're like, yeah, oh yeah, I knew this about myself. Or maybe you're like, oh, okay, this keeps showing up as something that I'm doing. Okay. And again, there's no judgment here. This is all cool. We're learning about things we're good at. So this is all positive. We're talking about how awesome you are. So are there any commonalities? The second question that I have then is, what characteristics do you value? And this is interesting because, I read off that laundry list and you know character traits in your head. So, which characteristics do you value? Like, take a look at your list, but then you can also think, are there ones that are important to me that haven't popped up on this list yet? Again, no judgment and no wrong answers here. We're just digging a little deeper. Another question, of these values that are important to you, of the values that you have shown that you that you actively do, what's the hardest one to
Mm.
exemplify? Is there one that's like takes work? Because some of these might just be, oh, I was born this way, it's God given. Some might be some, traits that you value, but they're hard. So again, read through your list. Look at that connection that you have between what you were brainstorming and the traits that they show. And then I wonder if you can get down to a list of your 3 to 5 top strengths that you have. Can we boil it down to what our top strengths are? And, why does this matter? Well, again, there's been studies. There was one in 2008 by Dreyer. There was one in 2005, Seligman et al., all in positive psychology, that say that when we use our personal strengths that we've identified, it can make us healthier, happier, and more successful across several different metrics. And again, great news, we can begin living more creatively using our strengths to branch out and do new things at any age or stage of our life.
Mm.
Like there is no, oh, I missed the bank on this. Oh, I was good with this when I'm younger, but that's in the past and I'll never be good at it again. No, 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 no. This is a hopeful, hey, we're going into a new season. Maybe you are going into a new transitional time, a new season of your life. Maybe things are going to look different than they did over the summer. Maybe you just feel kind of stuck and you don't know what the next season looks at. Like, oh my gosh, have I been there? Identifying what your strengths are and what you're good at, hey, that can give you some insight moving forward. Where can I put my energy at? How can I use these strengths, right? Because when we're using our strengths, again, happier, healthier, more successful, we feel that linking with a purpose, right? Like, oh no, this feels good. Because I'm sure we've all spent time and energy working towards a project, doing things that just didn't align. Like we weren't lit up by it. We were, it
Mhm.
just wasn't, we were using, talents and skills we had, but it wasn't something we were passionate about. And I'm telling you, that spark that can ignite when you're using something that you know is a strength and you're using it to work creatively on something, like, man, that really is a sweet spot that I am honestly only just discovering. But hey, I'm proof in the pudding that it can happen at any age if you're willing to go through this stuff. Mom, your thoughts on the reflections?
Okay, I love it when the plane lands and uh, being keyed up to start thinking about these things. I hope you guys listening are finding ways to connect them because my big takeaway here is I feel like I had a skill set that really lit me up professionally. And I had a great career. I had more opportunities than most. It was awesome. I had wonderful ways, the things, my strengths were highlighted and they were used. Creativity, love of learning, bravery, humor, leadership. And when that situation ended and I moved on to the next phase of my life and I didn't automatically have an outlet for those, I created it.
Mm,
And I have made and put myself into situations, some of it unconsciously, some of it very directly, and have been able to find outlets for my strengths that build on the things that just nourish me. And
mm,
it didn't happen overnight, but I feel that if I'm working toward it and I'm starting to get the benefit and I'm like, oh, I'm starting to use that, then I have gas in the tank to keep going for however long it takes. It's the process for me. It's not the destination. It's how I'm living. It's not like the end prize. And I really see that in place as I take a look at my strengths. If I look at the brainstorming of a day, a week, a year, and a lifetime, and they're all in there. but they're all in there now too. So these strengths, which I do think are gifts that I've been given, and maybe it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, but I feel like I'm using these things that I inherently have that are unique to me and how they present themselves. So I'm thinking it doesn't matter where I'm at. I'm going to find a way to use them because they're important to me and they're important to the world. And I talk about having a purpose that isn't situational, but it's lifelong.
Mm.
It's pretty cool.
So, for you listening, if you know you should, but it's hard, and you want to know how can I celebrate my strengths, I hope you got some insight today by going through our brainstorming and reflection session. As always, we so appreciate you joining us on this journey. It was nice to have a little break, but it's also nice to be back. Until next time, Rebels.